Did the recent Cyberpunk 2077 gameplay see a downgrade? This was a discussion that popped up almost immediately after the new gameplay drop. A lot of people questioning back and forth whether or not the game looks better or worse. In reality, it seems like it's somewhere in the middle. As to whether or not there's been a downgrade, I think the answer to that may actually be kind of surprising to some of you. So firstly, before we dive into the whole downgrade aspect or the proof or lack thereof, I would first like to clear up some of the misconceptions or rumors I've been seeing around this discussion. Firstly, a lot of people have been saying, oh, well, it's of course just because of the stream quality. Last year, Cyberpunk 2077 streamed in 4K, while this year they only streamed in 1080p. That's why people are perceiving a downgrade. So although yes, that may have played a role, for this video and for many of the comparisons online, they're comparing YouTube videos that weren't streamed, that were just uploaded. Then we get to the switch of people are saying it looks like a downgrade because of YouTube's compression, or just that's how videos posted online look, to which what? I don't even get that argument. The only way you've seen footage of Cyberpunk for the vast majority of people is through a video posted online. All of them go through compression. To me, that counter argument just seemed like fanboys trying to downplay it as much as possible. But for the sake of this video, exactly where I'm getting the footage I will be comparing is from Cyberpunk's official YouTube channel. Two videos downloaded in identical ways in 4K that underwent the same compression system. And to be totally clear, the gameplay is reportedly recorded in 1080p and upscaled to 4K for YouTube in order to get a better bitrate. Originally, this whole downgrade thing wasn't something I was really going to talk about. I think the gameplay overall, even though I didn't love the style of it, still looked pretty good. The lighting definitely looked improved, some of the animations, the reactions, even the HUD. I just really liked a lot of the visual aspects of this. But one of the things that actually drove me towards this video was, after making a complete breakdown of the trailer, which you could find by clicking on the link in the eye, I started to notice some oddities, some merit behind these downgrade claims, in particular when looking at weapons. Naturally, after making a trailer breakdown, the next thing you want to do is actually get a screenshot from the trailer to use as the thumbnail for that video. As I tried to do that, I went through and found a lot of blurriness around many of the various scenes. You could see just while holding a weapon or walking around with it, it kind of looked like there was a small passive blur over it. This became particularly apparent when we compare it to some of these similar or almost identical scenes from last year's gameplay demo. That seemingly is the main comparison for these downgrade arguments. Again, I found this to be particularly obvious when you were just standing there holding a weapon. You could skip through the frames and find a blurry shot from each gameplays, but with the new gameplay, it was almost like you could never find a non-blurred shot. It was almost always blurred. Despite that, the HUD was super crisp. Even other aspects of the game looked super crisp, like enemies approaching you. It was just the weapons in your hands always just didn't look super good. They looked cool and interesting, but definitely had that blurry effect. And in my opinion, you could find this all throughout the gameplay if you watch it fairly slowly. Little blurriness on objects here and there that just seemed kind of odd, and in some instances almost a little out of place. So although yeah, that's a little odd, maybe it just is a downgrade, the even more odd or confusing part about this was, if you compare the most recent gameplay drop with the gameplay deep dive to the E3 sneak peek we saw earlier this June. This is actually the same gameplay, although recorded separately. So they recorded the same gameplay two different times, doing the exact same things, but two separate instances. A Reddit user by the name Always Newbie made an album comparing these from the June sneak peek to the September deep dive, and you could see pretty clearly that things look different. Sometimes it is fairly subtle, but other times it's not. This hacking picture with the hands in particular, you could just see the hands are blurrier. They're not as crisp or as detailed as they were previously, despite everything else looking at least remotely similar. I'll have a full link to this album down below, as well as I'm obviously showing you some of the images in the background. But taking all of that together, it certainly to me at least looks like things were changed. In some instances, things definitely look worse. Well, the answer to this actually is probably going to be kind of interesting. We also found out that around this new deep dive gameplay release, it was using ray tracing. Ray tracing, if you're not familiar, is really broken down to a lighting overhaul in games. It's meant to be very true to form, very realistic, but also very system intensive. Nvidia did again confirm that the new gameplay was featured using ray tracing. They actually uploaded it to their own channel with such a label. Ray tracing is really intensive on a system, leading to significantly lower frame rates if you have it on versus off. As such, Nvidia actually implemented a new kind of filter you can apply to games known as DLSS to go hand in hand with with ray tracing. Put simply, what DLSS is going to do is make cuts in some places. NVIDIA says it's using machine learning and it's almost meant to look identical to when it's off, but the ultimate goal of DLSS is to actually maintain your frame rate while using ray tracing. Well, if you actually look at this comparison of Battlefield 5 with DLSS on versus the DLSS off, we see something very familiar, almost identical to what we're seeing in Cyberpunk 2077. Notice how the gun has that similar blur, even some of the background objects and scenery. The walls look a little bit more tainted or blurred and just gives it that same or very familiar weird look that we see with the most recent Cyberpunk gameplay. Something else that may give a similar effect is temporal anti-aliasing. This is another toggleable feature that's meant to improve your visuals, specifically when you have lower frame rates. If you look at this little slider for Rainbow Six Siege, notice the gun and the gun sights in particular. A very familiar or similar blurring effect that we're seeing with Cyberpunk. So it's kind of an ultimate conclusion to this. What I think is going on with the most recent Cyberpunk gameplay is, one, there is a downgrade, absolutely. I mean, especially with this hand image, I think it's kind of hard to argue it doesn't look worse in the newer gameplay that is actually more accessible and more widely distributed, but it seems like the causes of this aren't just CD Projekt lowering the textures or the render issues other people are claiming. Rather, it's some of the filters that were applied while this gameplay was recorded. In an attempt to show off the rather cool aspects of ray tracing, they also came with some of the downsides, and thus enabled DLSS to keep that frame rate up and also TAA, which I think is what is conveying this effect. So if this does end up being true, it would mean really just one big thing, that it's all optional. If you want the gameplay to look as crisp as it did earlier this year, or even potentially as crisp as it did last year, all you would have to do is disable these two features, or just never enable them in the first place. Although Cyberpunk may have received a downgrade, it's almost like an optional one that you will never have to see. And also, just to be clear, it's really not even that much of a downgrade. Things large in part do look pretty good all throughout this gameplay. A lot of other improvements can be seen in animations and enemies and how they react to certain things. Keanu certainly needs some love. That model definitely could use a little bit of work before release, but all in all, I'm still immensely excited for this game, and hopefully I cleared up some of these recent concerns or what people thought were rumors. I think in this video it's pretty clear these aren't rumors, there is actually something different going on. But yeah, as always, again, I thank you all for watching. Hopefully you found this informative, but with that, I hope to see you all next time. Later.